What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Lace Up channel. My name's Mickey. Welcome to the most impactful, most beneficial video I've made all year. I've spent the last 24 hours evaluating, analyzing, digesting the 10K filing from US Foods last year. I wanted to understand the revenues, not just that, but how they think, their thought process, so that I could convey little nuggets of beneficial information to small distributors like you so that you could utilize these things within your territory to profit in the upcoming years against the likes of US Foods and other broadline distributors. So if that sounds interesting to you, stay tuned to this video. Anyways, let's get right into it. So before we get into the details of the 10K filing, let's talk numbers. Last year, in revenue, US Foods made $22.885 billion. Of that, they take $3.719 billion in gross profits, and they operated at a loss last year of $77 million. Now you may ask yourself, how can a company that does so much in gross profits operate at a loss? Well, Johnny, great question. They do so because last year was COVID. And during COVID, a lot of the restaurants, and specifically those independent restaurants across the country, they suffered. They had to implement social distancing guidelines. They were shut down. And these are a big cohort, a big customer group that represents a large chunk of US food sales. That industry was destroyed, and that's reflected in that $77 million operating loss. Whereas the last year before COVID, 2019, they did $699 million in operating income. And the year before, $658 million in operating income. So those are the numbers. Now let's get into what they view as their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and threats. So as we work our way down this 10K filing, the first thing that they talk about are their demographics. More specifically, they talk about the ever-increasing power of Gen Z and millennials. This represents the single biggest cohort in the United States at 89 million of the US population being these generations. Not to mention, this represents the bigger portion of the US purchasing power, meaning that our generation dictates what the suppliers like US Foods will be supplying to retail stores and restaurants. Why? Because my generation, we think completely different than previous generations before us. We care about healthy and sustainable alternatives. We care about organic products. We care about dining experiences. We care about convenience and comfort. That means that the way that we operate will shift the way that you operate. And that's what US Foods is thinking about, and that's how they are altering their product lines to be more diverse, to be more ethnic, to be more healthy, and to be more organic. And these are the things that you need to be thinking about. So next they talk about the importance of technology, more specifically the importance of e-commerce. To take it word from word from their 10K filing, they say, e-commerce solutions streamline the purchasing process and increase customer retention. Not to mention that e-commerce is better able to accelerate customers' adoption of new products and increase customer loyalty, giving them a competitive edge. That's exactly what my experience with e-commerce has been. My generation, we love e-commerce. Think of how much you use Amazon. Think about how much you use Walmart online. You order almost everything from these websites. Why don't you as a distributor offer your customers an e-commerce website, just like US Foods is doing? The e-commerce website is agnostic to relationship. It's agnostic to what they feel about a customer. It's agnostic to emotions. It just wants to do the thing that your business needs the most, which is optimize profits. That is why they have optimized their business for e-commerce, and that's why you should too. So after talking about demographics and the advantage that they have with e-commerce, they get into the risks. Here's where it gets super juicy. The first risk that they talk about is that their business is a low margin business. Shocker! The distribution world is low margin. Oh, my mind is blown. But more importantly, they talk about the drawbacks of both a deflationary environment and an inflationary environment. What do I mean? Because they operate on fixed profit margins for their items, deflation could mean a loss in net income. So let's say that you operate at 15% for a $1 good. Well, if deflationary pressures push that product down from $1 to 80 cents, now you're only making 15 cents on 80 cents versus 15 cents on $1, and your net bottom line decreases as a result. Not to mention inflation. So inflation, I think we've all seen much more recently is much more applicable to what's going on in the market right now. With inflation, there's an upward pressure on prices. Things go up. And with inflation, this could push the profit margins of a distributor down in two ways. The first way being that when inflation initially happens, when that wave comes, the distributor is unable to adjust their prices fast and efficiently enough to offset that inflation, meaning that they are having to swallow that decrease in profits to deal with the inflation. That's the first aspect. There's a lag between the time that their suppliers raise their prices to the time that they can raise the price to the end customer. Not just that, but with inflation completely decreases the purchasing power of the end consumer. Let's say, for example, I make $80,000 a year, and of that $80,000, $40,000 is my discretionary spending income. Let's say that there's a 10% increase to inflation. This means that $40,000 is now $36,000 in purchasing power. So my purchasing power has decreased from $40,000 to $36,000, meaning that now I'm unable to buy $4,000 worth of goods and services. And because of this, the distributor, US Foods in this scenario, may be unable to increase my pricing in the event of inflation, which means that their profit margins shrink because my ability to spend discretionary income shrinks. So deflation and inflation are both potential risks to the distribution world and to US Foods. Next, they talk about competition and how intense it is. Specifically, competitors or distributors that have geographic reach, private label offering, overall purchasing power efficiencies, and the ability to meet customer demand distribution requirements. So, there's a bunch of small distributors across the US in towns, in segments of the country that US Foods cannot reach because US Foods cannot compete with these people. These people are able to provide to their customers something US Foods cannot, which is one of those things that are aforementioned. Not to mention that you are able to have relationships with these customers that US Foods can. You are able to provide a face to the voice. You are able to go out and talk and do a grassroots relationship building approach with these customers that US Foods can't. That's why there is a tremendous amount of value in being able to build a small monopoly in your area. A monopoly, let's call it, that builds a moat around your area that US Foods cannot penetrate. So my recommendation is to offer something with private label, something with better service, something with an overall purchasing power increase for the customer, meaning you're able to offer something at a lower price than US Foods can. If you can do any of these things, you will take business away from US Foods. Next, they talk about the increasing competition from online wholesale distributors and retailers, specifically Amazon and Walmart. They talk about how that business from Amazon and Walmart used to make up a small segment of their sales, and now it's going straight to consumer, which means that now they cannot partake in their profits. So that is going directly against their bottom line. And guys, how can you take advantage of this? Well, is there anything that you sell or provide that you could sell through Amazon? Is there anything that you provide that you could sell through Walmart.com? Normally, if you produce, you hold the power in your hands. You've got the bull by its horns. But the important thing is that you're able to optimize and take advantage of these mediums and these channels, whereas US Foods can't, because they're not necessarily a manufacturer and producer of all the goods and products they sell. As a matter of fact, they only manufacture and produce a small segment of their product list. So perhaps this is another opportunity for you to take advantage. Next, they talk about how they are at the mercy of their suppliers, meaning that their supplier at any point in time could face a supply shortage. Their supplier could choose to work with another distributor that offers a better cost structure to the manufacturer. So they are terrified of the supplier having an interruption in production or eliminating them altogether as a distributor. So this means, guys, why don't you work together with your suppliers to build a unique contract, a contract that gives you exclusivity over that product? This could be a way to take control over US Foods within your territory. Not to mention that having the relationship with suppliers is what gives you the control over the entire market, right? What is to separate you from another distributor if not the relationship, if not the service you give your supplier? The next major point that they touch upon are GPOs and how GPOs make up 21% of their sales. So GPOs are these groups that aggregate a bunch of customers within them and use the purchasing power of that bunch of customers to buy from US Foods. The problem is that these GPOs, they are incentivized to minimize the cost structure for the consumer. So let's say the GPO operates with 5 chain stores in the area, and that those 5 chain stores want to purchase as a corroborative or as a collaborative, I don't know how you would say it, from US Foods. Well, the GPO's incentive is to get the lowest price from US Foods possible. In could come any distributor and undercut US Foods with that GPO, and the GPO is incentivized to go with you. So within this paragraph, they talk about if an independent restaurant customer becomes a member of a GPO that has a contract with us, we may be forced to lower our prices to that customer. Think about that. So they've got a bunch of customers that aren't part of a GPO. All of a sudden, those customers become part of that GPO, and now their profit margins are crushed. Guys, why don't you build relationships with these GPOs? Why don't you get in bed with them and figure out how to deliver the best price at the best service to them to force people like US Foods out? It's a $24 billion portion of their business times 0.21%. So 21% of that 24 billion is what these GPOs represent for US Foods. That business could be going to you. So apart from the GPOs, they then go on to talk about that their most profitable customers are independent restaurants. They work closely with independent restaurants to provide and supply private label goods because private label items tend to be the highest margin products. Oh my goodness, look at that nugget of information. Are you guys producing any private label products? Do you have anything that's your brand? Because if you do this and you work with these restaurants, you have a higher probability of maximizing your profit margins. Look, that makes up one of their biggest profit margin revenue streams. This little tidbit, the ability to work with independent restaurants and to supply to them profitable private label products is what makes up their business. So now I'm going to touch upon a few additional things that they talk about, which is fuel costs may fluctuate. We've all seen those go up and kill our profits. They talk about changes in consumer eating habits. I think we touched upon that, but they say specifically in this segment that there is a growing consumer preference for sustainable, organic, and locally grown products. Changing consumer eating habits also occur due to generational shifts. Again, millennials, Gen Zs thinking a certain type of way. Next, a real interesting tidbit of information. They talk about how retailers like Amazon and Walmart are killing their profit margins by going straight to consumer. So the direct to consumer channel is increasingly growing. And remember, just a 10% decrease in purchasing from retail locations and a 10% increase in purchasing from direct to consumer like Amazon, like Walmart, will drastically diminish the revenue for a company like US Foods. So I would ask myself, if I were you, if I were a distributor, what can I do to go direct to consumer through platforms like Amazon and like Walmart? And I think increasingly you will find that the only thing to do is to contribute some kind of product that you manufacture yourself or private label yourself through these mediums. For example, the companies that I have that are most profitable in my industry are those that go straight to consumer through these mediums. They manufacture their own goods. They've got manufacturing of different goods across multiple sectors, and they make millions of dollars in profit margins as a result. And not only this, but they have the flexibility to switch the products that they produce on a whim and produce new products, especially those that do health and beauty. Anyways, guys, think about manufacturing or private labeling your own items. Next, they talk about how the competitor's ability to adopt an everyday low price strategy would potentially force them to offer lower prices or not be able to meet those lower prices at all and close business with that customer. So guys, can you operate at a smaller profit margin than US Foods? More than likely the answer to that is yes, because they have this huge infrastructure to maintain. Right? They probably have huge economies of scale in big cities, but when it comes to smaller towns and smaller locations or segments of the population, you will have an opportunity to provide a product at a lower price than they will. So the last thing that I want to touch upon that they view as a risk is their indebtedness. So the amount of debt they hold on their balance sheet, they hold over $5 billion on their balance sheet. So future risks to these profit margins, things that continue to decrease their profit margin more and more, will increase their pressure to pay back this debt. And if they can't service that debt, they will become insolvent. And nobody will come bail them out, and eventually they will go out of business. That's why, guys, it's super important that you don't maintain so much debt on your balance sheet that any small change to market conditions, any change to a segment of the population's behavior could impact you and force you to not be able to service that debt. As a matter of fact, most of this debt from what I was reading has to do with acquisitions they've made. It has to do with investments that they've made. But this amount of debt should not make up that much of your balance sheet, right? You shouldn't have $6 billion on your balance sheet when your overall shareholder equity is $3.5 billion. Guys, this is a no-no, and I hope that you guys take this to heart. Don't put that much debt on your balance sheet, nothing that you can't service. Even if your business were to shut down by 50%, if you could service that debt, you could remain solvent and continue to operate while businesses like this go out of business. Anyways, guys, I hope that you enjoyed that video. I hope that you took something away with how US Foods is thinking. If you did, give me a big like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I look forward to making content like this every single day. Really, I do. Anyways, guys, I hope that you have a great day. Take care.